Wednesday, he spoke out for the first time on the Russia probe, saying that charging President Trump with obstruction was never in the cards.
Mueller explained his decision not to reach a determination on obstruction of justice, saying it was based on longstanding Justice Department policy that a sitting U.S. president cannot be indicted.
Charging the president with a crime was therefore not an option we could consider.
Saying his report is his testimony, Mueller also said he has no intention of speaking any further about his investigation.
Any testimony from this office would not go beyond our report.
Mueller said he does not question Attorney General William Barr's good faith in releasing the report.
Fox News' Rachel Sutherland in Washington. Reaction splitting along party lines. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders saying Mueller did not deliver any real news.
There was no real news in there. He reiterated the points that he'd already made in the report, and we agree with him. There was no collusion, there was no conspiracy, and we consider this case closed. He completed his investigation. Now he's closed his office, and it's time for everybody to move on.
Democrats, however, made the point that Mueller made it clear that any action against the president must come from Congress, not the Justice Department Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
I am gravely disappointed in the Justice Department for their attitude, their misrepresentation of the Mueller report to begin with, their hiding behind something that you could never find in the Constitution, that the president is above the law.
A growing number of Democrats calling for impeachment. And U.S.-China trade tensions sent stocks lower again. The Dow fell 221 points Wednesday, had been down more than 400. This is Fox News.
The sky's the limit with Bank Pacific's secure MyCloud banking. You can access your account 24/7 with your smartphone, your computer, your iPad, or any other tablet. You can pay bills, set up alerts, check your balances, wire transfer money. It's never been easier. Enroll online or come on in and see one of our friendly staff. Digital Life, Digital Solutions. Bank Pacific.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Viva Bank Pacific.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
The National Weather Service confirms a record 15 tornadoes slammed Ohio Monday, and they're still counting. People starting to pick up the pieces. Governor Mike DeWine says the state government and federal government will help.
We don't have any magic wand as far as me coming in here, and I can't put these houses back together. We have some understanding of what you're going through. We're going to do absolutely anything that we can, that you want us to do, that we can do to be of help.
Meantime, the tornado that shredded homes near Kansas City Tuesday night was a massive EF4. And on Wednesday, tornadoes plowed through 7 states from Texas to New Jersey, with one in Prestonburg, Kentucky, killing 1 person. Police in Utah believe they found the body of 5-year-old Lizzie Shelley, who'd been missing for 5 days.
My notion at this point is that we have Lizzie, but we still have yet to confirm positively that that is her.
Logan Police Chief Gary Jensen says they charged the girl's uncle, Alex Whipple, with murder, kidnapping, and desecration of a body. A new video game wants you to snooze and play.
Put your feet up, close your eyes, and relax, and maybe win. That's the idea behind new mobile game Pokemon Sleep, announced at Wednesday's Pokemon press conference in Japan. Shinakazu Ishihara, who created the Pocket Monsters, explains.
Pokemon Sleep utilizes information such as the player's time spent sleeping or the time they wake up to create a new kind of entertaining gameplay.
It shows a sharp contrast to the popular Pokemon Go game, which brought people out of the house to catch them all. This one encouraging folks to stay in bed so that they can
look forward to waking up every morning.
Eamon Dignam, Fox News.
And Israel appears headed, or actually is headed, for new elections after the prime minister failed to form a new coalition government. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Join Ray Gibson as he celebrates 40 years on the air.
40 years Yours already? Hi, I'm doing the big broadcast from BMW's brand new showroom at Atkins Kroll, and I want you to join in on the fun. Come on by and see us do the show live and in person. And since it's a party, we've got all kinds of super goodies to give away. United Airlines is letting me give away 2 tickets to Japan. And your next trip to the Philippines, we've got your hotel accommodations covered with goodies from Resort World Manila. It's been a great ride, and this is a great excuse to get caught up with some of our favorite guests and friends of the show.
Ray Gibson's 40th anniversary show is brought to you by AK BMW and Shooting Star Productions, with special thanks to United Airlines and Resorts World Manila.
Tune in Friday, June 7th, or check out the Points Facebook live feed, provided and produced by Shooting Star Productions.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I'll say that to anybody speaking truth to power. And if Joe Biden were sitting right here in the studio, perish the thought, I would look him right straight in the eye and say the same thing. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, Joe Biden. So here's the latest on Joe Biden from bearing arms. Biden pledges to defeat National Rifle Association. I guess some guys will do almost anything to get on the card at Tall Tales, right, Real Joe Cruz?
Absolutely, sir.
Biden versus NRA. That's what he figures that if he could just crack that nut, his nomination as the Democrat nomination for president would be secured. So here's what Tom Knighton says. Former President Joe Biden is the front runner for the Democrat nomination for president. That's not surprising, since he's a former vice president and was part of the Obama administration, which Democrats seem to view as positive for some insane reason. However, if he wanted to keep that status, he's going to have to beat the anti-war, the anti-gun war drum. Now, when it comes to beating war drums, he won't be the only person, the only Democrat beating the war drum, will he? The Real Joe Cruz just stepped out of the room. I was about to test him to see if he would know who else on the Democrat side would. Yeah, he's back. So let me run this, try this again here, Real Joe Cruz. If Biden wanted to keep the status as front runner, he's got to beat the anti-gun war drum. Do you know of any other Democrat candidate who's beating a war drum?
Nancy?
No, come on, Real Joe Cruz. Massachusetts. Should I send you a smoke signal so you could figure it out?
Oh, man, it's eluding me right now.
It begins with a P.
Pocahontas.
Pocahontas. Yeah. Good morning, Real Joe Cruz.
Good morning.
Yeah, all right. The program has begun, Real. You got to be on your toes in there in the control room there, Real Joe Cruz. Yeah, so Biden's got to beat the anti-gun war drum. He knows that Elizabeth Warren, senator from Massachusetts, will be beating her own war drum, more than likely putting on the war paint. And if Biden's not careful, Elizabeth might sneak up behind him with a tomahawk. Former President Joe Biden pledged on Tuesday to, quote, defeat the National Rifle Association as part of his 2020 campaign promise to fight for school safety. As president, here's a quote, as president, he will secure the passage of gun legislation to make our students safer. And he knows he can do it because he's defeated the National Rifle Association twice before. Biden's plan, which was released on Tuesday, read, it stated part of the plan to defeat the NRA, including supporting legislation that banned assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. His plan came after a slew of school shootings that prompted Democrats to call for gun control laws. Biden's plan seemed more moderate than the other 2020 candidates, specifically Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey and Kamala Harris, Democrat of California, in that it focused on working through Congress rather than substantially expending the executive authority in the ways others propose doing. Of course, Biden didn't mention that we had an assault ban for a decade, and it accomplished jack squat. He should know. He was part of the Congress that passed it. He was also there when the major sunset, when the major came to sunset, and discussions were had about possibly renewing the law. It was pointed out then that the law didn't do anything. At the time, anti-gunners pointed to a decrease in the crime rate and tried to claim credit for it. The problem was the crime rate had been dropping for years before the assault weapon ban and continued at the same rate after the ban went into effect. Further, that crime rate continued to drop after the ban sunset. In other words, it didn't do a damn thing. Tom Knighton's words, not mine. It didn't do a damn thing. Now, either Biden knows this, in which case he's pandering, or he doesn't, which means he's an idiot. I tend to go with the second one.
I agree, sir.
Yeah. Of course, pandering doesn't preclude stupidity. You can be stupid and still pander. I've seen it on more than one occasion. If there's at least one good thing about Biden's proposals, it's that he's acknowledging the limits of executive power. If we're going to get saddled with federal gun control laws, they have to come through Congress. That's how the Constitution lays out the legislative process. Congress passes laws, the president signs and enforces those laws. Presidents don't get to make them up on their own. Further, as noted in the quote above, Biden's proposal is less bombastic, a really good word to use when you're talking about gun control. Bombastic. It's more moderate. That's likely to play better with moderate members of the Democrat Party, voters who are feeling more and more alienated by the liberal extremism that's taking hold of it. These are voters who don't like assault weapons, typically, but also aren't interested in radically changing the firearms landscape. Not that what Biden is proposing is any better. Gun control is gun control. We don't need any of it. Nope. It should be interesting to see what role gun control plays in the primary process. Yeah, let's watch the 20 Democrats tripping over each other going into the primary season to see who could be the most anti-gun and get to the farthest of the left in the Democrat Party. That's going to be interesting. It should be interesting to see what role gun control plays in the primary process. We'll learn a lot about the hearts and minds of Democrats in the process. So that's a Second Amendment for today. I know it would never happen. Joe Biden wouldn't have enough courage to come in here and face the scathing cross-examination of the host of tall tales. not Joe Biden, especially when I got into my plagiarism kick. Okay, so Real Joe Cruz, we finished Zemi, as you were, we finished the Second Amendment. Let's go straight to Zemi Ikotny. Well, if at first you don't succeed, try again, Real Joe Cruz. Okay, here's the Daily News. And, you know, we always dissect the editorials every day. We go through them with a blue pencil, see if either one of them uses the English language properly, usage-wise and grammar-wise. Try to figure if they know what they're talking about. And an editorial using the language properly, where it appears that the author of the editorial knows what, I was going to say he or she, but I better not, knows what they are talking about, and gives us something we can sink our teeth into, something that causes us to say, yeah, I agree with that. Or, oh, where do they get off saying that? Or, yeah, I hope the politicians are reading this because the editorial's right on point. If this is how you get to win the coveted Blue Star, which is one, you know, it's not the Pulitzer Prize for journalism. It's pretty close, though, yeah. Okay, so here's the Daily News editorial title: Our View, Motor Voter Registration Process Highlights Gov Guam's Lagging Technology. The motor voter portion of a newly revised Guam driver's license identification card is shown in a picture. It gives those applying for a new or renewal driver's license the opportunity to also register to vote simply by checking the space before the phrase, quote, consent to register for vote, and by signing their name. Now, if it happens to be that we've got conjoined twins that are registering for a driver's license, do they both have to sign? I suppose. The news that it has taken the government of Guam 4 years to partially implement the motor voter law is not surprising, as the government is generally not known for swift action. Well, the author of this editorial has a genius for understatement, doesn't he? Or they? But it's discouraging that in 2019, representatives of the Guam Election Commission must travel to the Department of Rev Tax and manually collect information submitted by potential voters. The law allows eligible voters to register when they apply for a new or renewal Guam driver's license on the Guam ID card at Rev Tax. A motor voter section on the license and ID form asks voters if they consent to register. This is not a new idea. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, commonly known as the Motor Voter Act, requires that each state motor vehicle's driver's license application include any renewal application must serve as a simultaneous voter registration application. And I have to ask now, where does Congress get the ability to tell states how to put their driver's licenses together? I know the answer, but I don't like the answer. And it goes right back again to the fact that those faceless bureaucrats in Washington are working as hard as they can so that we have a national government instead of a federal government with 50 administrative districts. It hasn't been that long. I think probably it was sometime in the late 60s when South Dakota even required a driver's license. Before that, if you're driving in South Dakota, you didn't even need a driver's license. And now Uncle Fed is telling the states how their applications must look. And I suppose that it's the ability to regulate Congress, as it were, commerce among the states that gives the Congress the power to do that. But I don't like it, and I don't agree with it. This is not a new, as you were. Guam, along with other territories and 6 states, was exempt from the law. I wonder which 6 states that was. The federal law, which went into effect in 1995, also requires states to transmit the motor voter information to election officials within 10 days. Almost a quarter century later, our local government is still not capable of transmitting information from Rev Tax to the Guam Election Commission because of, quote, system connectivity issues, according to Guam Election Commission Executive Director Maria Pangilinan. She said Guam Election Commission employees have to go to Rev Tax in Barrigada twice a week to see who consented to register to vote. See, they go to the Rev Tax office in Barrigada? I wonder when it was moved. Last time I went up there, it was in Dadido. Maybe the editorial writers know something that we don't know. Maria says they'll be going there more frequently as 2020 elections draw near. This technology lag would not be acceptable in the private sector. Imagine employees from one office driving to another office in another village, manually collecting information and driving back to the main office twice a week. It's inexpensive, inefficient, and with modern technology, it's unnecessary. So I have a suggestion. Maria and Daphne, why don't you get together and get some kite string and string a long piece of kite string from the Rev Tax office in Barrigada down to the Election Commission in the GCIC building, and then take 2 tin cans and punch holes in the bottom of the tin cans, stick that kite string through the hole, tie a knot in it, and if you do it just right, one person can talk into the tin can and the other person can hear the whatever is being said at the other end of the kite string. Apparently, that's the level of technology we're capable of right now. Did you ever do that when you were a kid, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir, I did.
Yeah, well, maybe you could be the technological supervisor to link up revenue and taxation with the Election Commission. Are you up to it?
If I'm going to get a bonus, yes, sir.
Well, we got to meet an executive. We'll give you a bonus, but we got to meet an executive session to figure out how much. Yeah, so how to make the easy ones look hard. That's kind of the way we operate. And I got to put my 2 cents worth in here on, I already spoke about how I don't think the national government has any business telling states how to run elections, states and territories, especially when you know that the territory isn't going to pay any attention to you anyhow. But, you know, this whole hype about let's get everybody registered and let's get out the vote. And on election day, we want everybody to come out and vote. Vote for whoever you want, but we want everybody to vote. Now, I'm going to say something that is undemocratic, so fasten your seatbelts. If I were to look at it from a selfish standpoint, the fewer people that vote in an election, the more weight my vote has. If we live in if there are 40,000 voters and 10,000 of them don't show up, only 30,000 of them show up, then the denominator of the fraction gets smaller and the numerator is still 1. So if everybody here at the point got a chance to vote on what the proper disposition of real Joe Cruz should be. And the only people that voted were the real Joe Cruz and I. We have a lot more ability to have things happen the way we want them to happen, that if every single man jack among the staff votes, right, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
So I don't know how excited I can be about, well, let's make it really, really easy for people to vote. We know that everybody wants a driver's license. Now, a lot of folks, to go to the mayor's office and register to vote, or to run into some guy in a coffee shop, one of these volunteer registrars, and to fill out a paper, it's too much trouble. That's too much work. Now, I don't know how excited I can be about getting those folks registered to vote. As idealistic as I am, I would hope the people that vote have spent some time getting up to speed on who and what they're voting for. I labor under this perhaps archaic belief that the more intelligent the voter, perhaps the better our government will operate, because we will choose good people to operate our government. But if it's one of those kinds of things, well, it's hard to register. So when you go for your driver's license, just mark that box there. And then on election day, if you don't have anything else to do, come on down for the barbecue, stumble into the polls, just mark up the paper. It doesn't make any difference how you mark up the paper. Just do it, come back out to the barbecue, and everyone will pat you on the back, say, good job, you did your civic duty. Yeah, I suppose, once again, I'm going to be kind of on the outside of this, because it's more important to pander to those folks, especially if you're running for office. Oh, we want everybody to get out and vote, parenthesis. And don't forget that I'm the one who was so nice to you when I asked you to vote for, just vote, and I didn't say vote for me. But just remember, it was me that asked you to vote. Yeah. Okay, so that's the Daily News editorial. I am not going to downgrade the Daily News editorial on those 2 points, because they really didn't speak to the fact that our national government has now gotten into the business of telling us how states should prepare their driver's license applications, and also that it may not be the most enlightened policy available to allow people who don't have the ambition to go through the regular registration process to vote. I'm not going to hold that against the Daily News. They're playing on a field that somebody else prepared for them. Okay, let me take a look at the Post. And here's what the Post says. Back where we started with gambling at the Liberation Carnival. Yeah. It's troubling. It's a troubling turn of events to see gambling approved and back at the Liberation Carnival. The casino building, the very building that started the recent debate on gambling on Guam, will be returned to its original use as a house of cards. 2 years ago, when the casino building was being constructed, people took notice. And with just months to go before the start of the annual Liberation Day festivities, the games of chance were made illegal. And I remember who gets the credit for that. Senator Talina Nelson. Let's give her a round of applause. Yeah. Today we see the return of not just the games of chance that many residents can recall, like the color game and Beto, but also higher stakes casino-style games like blackjack and poker. And there's nary a peep from the legislature outside of Senator Talina Nelson to be heard. Nary a peep. Sure, there are new people in the legislature, but many senators in the 35th were also in that previous body, which passed Nelson's bill banning gaming on the Liberation Carnival grounds, as well as at village fiestas and fairs. The 34th legislature passed Nelson's bill unanimously. As voters and taxpayers, this reversal in position makes one wonder if the senators in the 35th no longer believe that gambling is wrong. And if that's the case, it would have helped if they had said so in the campaign. Certainly, many people would have considered that stance as they determined who would best represent them in the legislature. Most reasonable adults would agree that gambling and games of chance aren't things for our children, aren't things our children should be exposed to. Well, I agree with that. I'm a reasonable adult. How about you, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir. I agree too.
Yeah, you're a reasonable adult.
Pretty reasonable.
Okay. Especially not before they have a clear understanding of the costs of gambling's one's hard-earned money. In fact, one of the arguments that was made 2 years ago was that games of chance had no place in a carnival that's supposed to be family-friendly. And yet, here we are, back where we started. Yeah, good points. And good enough that item is going to be on the calendar today. I hope. I grabbed the wrong calendar. Yeah, we got the second item on the calendar is called Tall Tales versus the Mayor's Council. So we'll get back to that when we get down the calendar a little bit. So we got a break coming up here, the first half-hour break. I'll be back in just a minute with the calendar.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
2-for-1 dinner time is back at Ruby Tuesday Guam. That's 2 fresh garden bars, 2 tasty entrees, and a sweet dessert to share for just $25.99. 2-for-1 dinner time for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so this is what I've got on the calendar for this afternoon. I've got Joey Duenas versus the Ravenite Social Club. I've got Tall Tales versus the Mayor's Council. And some holdovers from yesterday, Marsh versus Magellan. Hilaan San Nicolas versus the Outrigger. And Our Carl versus Equality. So I'm going to start out here with Joey Duenas versus Ravenite, but I'll take care. I'll get Jimmy's call first, and then I'll go into the card. Afternoon, Jimmy.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Oh, just a question.
Yeah.
So, Gov Guam gives Gov Guam a bonus?
Well, we had that happen in the CCU, didn't we, Jimmy?
Gov Guam gives Gov Guam a bonus. And they bone us, taxpayers.
I guess I understand what you're saying, Jimmy. Interesting point. I got it, Jimmy.
You want to hear a joke?
Maybe a little later on, Jimmy, okay? I'm going to jump into the card now, Jimmy, so thanks for calling, okay? Okay, so we've got first item on the card is Joey Duenas versus Ravenite. I'm going to lay a foundation here, and then I'm going to take Ken's call because I know he has a lot to say about this item on the card. Joey Duenas versus the Ravenite Social Club. And those of you who were not following the career of John Gotti might not remember the Ravenite Social Club. But the Ravenite Social Club was located at 247 Mulberry Street. And it's where John Gotti got together with all of his made men. And they decided what it was that these men were going to do and who'd get what cut of any particular job, etc. It's where John Gotti, who was the godfather there, he was the Don, and his made men did their business. The Ravenite Social Club. Well, we have a sort of a functional equivalent here. The Ravenite Social Club is the executive session of the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. And Joey Duenas apparently is the Don. And, you know, the feds, through some complicated wiretapping of both the Ravenite and a room a couple of floors upstairs, with some wiretapping, we're able to get the goods on John Gotti and the made men. And we kind of have a sequel to John Gotti and the Ravenite Social Club right here on Guam. And it's the executive session of the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. The recording, which I asked for in my FOIA, I'm going to put my usual overwhelming sense of modesty aside here for the moment. I don't think you've ever seen that before, you have, you real Joe Cruz?
Not in my life, sir.
No. Well, there was a story in the Post by John O'Connor highlighting the sizable raises that members of the CCU had been awarded by the commission. And that was the end of the story, except at the bottom of the story it said, this was done in executive session. Well, I sent off a FOIA, and Kevin Kerrigan sent off a FOIA, et cetera, and we spent a lot of time talking about it here on Tall Tales. And it turned out that the Attorney General got involved and said those raises are null and void because you can't talk about salary in an executive session without violating the open government law. Now, at that time, Joey Duenas came forward and, you know, with a 21st century acceptance of blame, which is kind of like, well, I didn't do anything wrong, but if I did, I really didn't mean it, you know. There was a story in the Post where Joey said, the open government law allows CCU to hold closed-door meeting to discuss, let me go back a minute here. The subheading in this story from the Post going back to the 26th of March, Joey said, this was my fault as a chairman because I should have done a better job chairing the meeting. The open government law allows the CCU to hold closed-door meetings to discuss employment, but his mistake was not stopping the executive session to go back into public discussion when salaries were being discussed, Duenas said. But personnel evaluations discussed during executive session remain private, he said. And you remember all through this controversy, Joey kept coming back to that. The the evaluations are private, and we've got to protect the privacy rights of those employees, and on and on and on and on. It was a dumb interpretation of the law, which I've explained on more than one occasion. But let's assume, as lawyers would say, let's assume arguendo that it was a good interpretation of the law. Joey kept saying, well, yeah, I screwed up because we were doing evaluations in executive session, and I should have stopped when we finished that, then gone out and discussed salaries in open session. And he said, we can't release the minutes of the executive session. We can't forward the the electronic recording to the public auditor because we've got to protect the privacy rights of the employees involved when we were discussing their evaluations. Well, guess what? Everybody now has the opportunity to listen to the evaluation. To the evaluations thanks to the extremely good reporting by Kevin Kerrigan over at the Post. And the CCU furnished that recording to Kevin, and I don't know about the privacy rights here of the employees, but Kevin posted that recording on the Post, in the online edition of the Post. So if you haven't listened to it yet, I don't know what's on TV tonight, but if it's kind of a slow night on TV, what you could do is just listen to that, the recording. It's 43 minutes long, and it's probably more entertaining than some of the stuff on TV that passes itself off as comedy. And having listened to the recording, I have a greater understanding as to why Joey and Judy didn't want anybody else to hear that recording. But I listened to the whole thing, and Joey is trying to pull a fast one on us. He kept on saying, evaluations, privacy, etc. Well, I listened to the whole thing, and the only thing that could arguably be classified as an evaluation was a one-liner when they were, I don't know if they were flipping coins or rolling dice to see about the raises for the two directors, John Benavente and Miguel Bordallo. And the question was, well, shouldn't they be the same? And Joey said, no, John has got it harder than Michael does. And that was it. That was all the time. At least, unless somebody else heard something that I didn't hear, all the rest of the time was numbers and salaries, etc. So, Joey, you tried to fool us, and you got caught because you weren't discussing evaluation in that executive session, even if that's what the law says, which it doesn't. But you got caught, and now everything that you've done since that time makes perfect sense, doesn't it? You didn't want anyone to hear those tapes because of what I just said. You weren't talking about evaluation. So I've got the story here, but from the Post, but I've got something even better than that. I have one of the Tall Tales information gathering posse members on the line, right, Ken?
Hello, Judge.
Hi.
Well, like you, I was dumbfounded when I finally got around to listening to the 43 minutes. It's like 97% of the discussion was salary, very little, if anything, in the way of evaluation. So that puts a number of lies out. You know, the first one that we were discussing evaluations. No one discussed any evaluations. The second one is we didn't know what we were doing. You had two attorneys in the room, so their skill set and knowledge is now suspect. And then we find out that Simon Sanchez had a very extensive email conversation with former counsel on this exact same subject that he somehow forgot, you know. So, it just, all these issues go towards destroying the credibility that the members of the CCU members are looking out for the interests of the ratepayers. I mean, when you listen to the tape, it's like it's their company. Every other phrase is, our company's doing this, our company's doing great, yeah, we're doing good, But there's nothing in any of that conversation about ratepayers. There is a lot of expressions of concern about, how this is going to look to the public.
Which perhaps explains the reason that they didn't want the public in on that particular session. Kind of like when senators go into caucus at the legislature. Floor debates are obviously public, but there's an express exception from the open government law for senatorial caucuses. So senators go into caucus, maybe do a little log rolling, try to build some support for where they're going, and much of the conversation is about the public perception of what they want to do or don't want to do. You've seen me grab my political prism and look through it on more than one occasion, and my political prism filters out every concept, morals, the law, etc., and the only thing that comes through is the political considerations of what you want to do or don't want to do. I found my political prism when I was in the legislature because it's used all the time. And that's exactly what I heard on that tape.
Yeah, it is. And the whole point was this whole CCU process was supposed to isolate the utilities from the political process. But all it did was it narrowed down the number of decision makers from 21 to 5. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because now we have a group of people who do 99% of their work in unobserved, unwatched. I mean, they schedule their meetings for 4 o'clock in the afternoon when people are working or driving home. So that minimizes the opportunity to view their actions. They do a lot of stuff, apparently, that they shouldn't do in executive session. And it's not just this board. I'm finding out it's a pattern.
Yeah, well, let's come back to this board, Ken. I heard a lot of talk about salary, but I also heard something that didn't fit in there at all, and that was contracts. You remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, they were discussing the fact that as unclassified employees, there's a box around what they can do in the way of benefits. And by giving the top management people personal service contracts, they can step outside the box. And I thought that was a little very alarming, because now we're taking what little control we have over these executives and bulletproofing them. In other words, if we give some guy a 10-year contract, there's nothing that we're going to be able to do to remove him other than buy out his contract.
Well, it would depend on how the contract is worded, but maybe I heard something that wasn't there. But I heard the discussion of contracts as a way of doing something that wouldn't be possible in an ordinary employment situation. Did I hear something that was not there with respect to...
Well, that's the way it sounded to me, too. It sounded like they were trying to find a way, because as unclassified employees, they get 30 days paid vacation, use it or lose it. And it sounded like they wanted to bank it. So that, I mean, when you're getting $25,000 a month and you bank 2 or 3 months of vacation, that's a $75,000 to $100,000 cash out at the end of the year. That's a nice, tidy lump sum.
At the end, especially at the end of a career, because it goes into your last year of your top 3.
Yeah, and one of the things I've noticed that executive directors in many departments and agencies, they take vacations all the time. They just don't call them vacations, you know?
Right.
So what they'll do is they'll take off for 6 weeks to go to a conference in Annapolis, Maryland. The conference is 6 days. Well, why did they have to go for 3 weeks, you know? So I'm noticing this stuff as I'm going through all these different documents that I've been getting from my FOIAs, and the taxpayers, the ratepayers, are the ones that are funding these. And that's why when I heard that part about creating a contract as a way of getting around these restrictions, my alarm bells went off just like yours did.
Why did I have the feeling that I'd seen that movie once before when David Cruz wanted to run for lieutenant governor and he wanted to keep working at the Department of Education? Remember that, Dodge?
Yeah.
We'll give him a contract.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they did. They moved him over to a contract.
Yeah.
But he was still working for government in Guam.
That's right. So I think the takeaway here, Ken, is that the only thing that keeps the ship reasonably on course is a vigilant group of citizens and a working press.
Yes, and I mean those are two of Thomas Jefferson's most powerful quotes. You know, that who governs the governors? Only the public has the power to hold the governors accountable. For without public oversight, we should not be surprised when those in power use their positions to enrich themselves and those close to them.
And then on a personal note, you know, I suppose my ego gets involved here, but I really don't like it when public officials set out to fool me about something. All this talk about, well, the evaluation was okay, we can do that in executive session. I just made a mistake by not coming back, when they didn't do any evaluating at all.
And they even discussed that in the meeting. They discussed, Francis Santos and brings up the fact that we need to, there's a law that says we have to do evaluations. And then Simon Sanchez says, well, technically, no, we don't. Francis says, yes, we do.
But it wouldn't have made any difference because they didn't anyhow. Well, anyhow, Ken, thanks a lot for giving us that report. Really appreciate it. I've got a break coming up here. I'm going to spend a little more time on this and then move on to the Mayor's Council. Thanks for calling in.
Okay, I think it's coming up soon.
Yeah, we're on Route 1 and near the airport intersection, right?
There, see it? What's the promo code? Look for the promo code.
Check out the Vantage Digital Billboard and reap the rewards. Catch the promo code on the screen and get $10 off your stroll ride by inputting the promo code on the Stroll Guam app.
Did you see it? You got it? I got it. You just focus on driving.
Take advantage today and take a look at Vantage Advertising's digital billboard located on Route 1 at the airport intersection.
So what's the deal? Are you still paying for the right to have your checking account at your bank? Well, at Bank Pacific, we think it's our privilege, not our right. That's why we offer My Green Free Checking, where your monthly maintenance checking fees are zero. That's zero. And it comes with a free Visa check card and monthly green e-statements. My Green Free Checking. Bank Pacific today. Because having you as our customer, that's our privilege.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, FDIC. Viva Bank Pacific.
So here we are. We got about 6 more minutes to the big halftime show that you've all been looking forward to. You could perhaps put the recording of the CCU executive session on in the background as you watch the football game during our big halftime show. I've just got a few more things that I want to touch on here before I leave this. One is that, the first time around on the motion to release the minutes, it was 3-2. Joey and Judy voted against it. The other 3 voted in favor. The second time around, Judy crossed over. And the newspaper didn't pick that up, and I'm wondering why she had a change of heart. Perhaps it's all of the information that she was able to gather by listening to Tall Tales, perhaps as good a source of information about the open government law and the Sunshine Law that a person can find just about anywhere. You listen every day and you could get a master's degree in open government just from listening to Tall Tales. One other thing I wanted to toss out here is that we have a standards of conduct law, an ethics law, and it's been on the books since 2005, and no governor has ever appointed commissioners to the Ethics Commission. We now have a full kit of ethics commissioners, and I would suspect that the Ethics Commission ought to start meeting right away. I haven't scanned the substantive elements of the Ethics Commission to see where that would take us with respect to what's been going on lately, but it might be kind of an interesting exercise. Now, it's not unethical to be dumb, to not know what you're doing. That's not unethical. It's unethical to know what you're doing and know that what you're doing is wrong and doing it anyhow because you think you won't get caught. I don't know if the ethics law is specific enough to pick that up, but that's kind of the way I think most folks would take a look at what is and what isn't ethical. It's not doing something not taking a particular action because in your mind, in accordance with right reason, it's okay to do that, but doing it even though you know it's not right because you think you're not going to get caught. Like you could say, well, I made a mistake here at the executive session because when we finished discussing evaluations, I should have gone back into an open session and discussed salary. And if you listen to the tape, that just isn't what they were discussing in executive session. They didn't discuss Joey's favorite car wash, but that's about the only thing they missed. Contracts and a very dollar-oriented discussion of salary. Also, they haven't produced the minutes yet, and I can kind of understand why. If Lou Sablon was in there, Joey didn't chair that meeting in executive session. It was kind of like at the Ravenite Social Club. I expected someone to say, shut up and crank off a round into the ceiling because it was so chaotic because no one was serving as the presiding officer in that executive session. It was kind of like, who can talk the loudest will probably have a good chance of carrying the day. And another thing on the ethics law, it added a chapter 15 to Title 4, and at section 15410A 10, we find this. That there is a requirement that every elected official, every board and commissioner, every director, etc., undergo a 4-hour training program shortly after he's appointed and then go through a refresher course every 4 years. And here are some of the things that are on in the curriculum. Guam statutes concerning ethics, personnel policy, government finance, and last, open government law and Sunshine Reform Act. Now everybody on that commission should have sat through that 4-hour training. Okay, enough of Joey Duenas versus the Ravenite Social Club. We'll come back and talk about Tall Tales versus the Mayor's Council.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Mueller refuses to clear the president of obstruction. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News.
If we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so.
Special counsel Robert Mueller makes his first and what he prefers to be his last public statement on the Russia probe and on whether the president tried to obstruct the investigation.
I hope and expect this to be the only time that I will speak to you in this manner.
Suggesting the Mueller report speaks for itself, the special counsel saying his probe found insufficient evidence that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to meddle in the 2016 election. But on the question of obstruction, Mueller suggesting he could not charge a sitting president due to Department of Justice guidelines.
It would be unfair to potentially accuse somebody of a crime when there can be no court resolution of the actual charge.
Those comments are being seized on by Democrats, many now saying it's up to Congress to pursue criminal charges on obstruction.
Fox's Tom Graham. Democratic chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, says all options, including impeachment of the president, are on the table.
Although Department of Justice policy prevented the special counsel from bringing criminal charges against the president, the special counsel has clearly demonstrated that President Trump is lying.
White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders sees it differently.
Look, if Bob Mueller had thought there was wrongdoing and was sure of it, he would have had a moral obligation to say that. He didn't.
Sanders says case closed, time to move on. New U.S. intelligence suggests Russia is likely violating international treaty on the banned on nuclear tests. The treaty bans any nuclear test. Moscow denies that it is testing anything. The U.S. says that those tests would help Russia upgrade its nuclear arsenal. This is Fox News.
Hey, it's Mom. Somebody forgot to thaw the chicken, so meet us at Chili's for 2 for $25. Oh, and congratulate your sister for making the basketball team. She's thrilled. Love you. See you at Chili's.
Enjoy 2 full meal combos for $25. An appetizer, 2 mouth-watering entrees like our crispy chicken breast, smoked barbecue quarter leg, or smoked jalapeno cheddar sausage. Served with corn on the cob and french fries. 2 bold combos for $25. A full-on meal deal available nightly for a limited time. Together, we Chili's.
We know too well the inconvenience of not having power after a storm. You worry about the food in the freezer going bad. Nights get hot. It's hard finding comfort when going to sleep. These are realities. But with solar and battery storage from Micronesia Renewable Energy, these realities can be a thing of the past. The solar works during the day and the batteries power your home at night. Call 632-2613 to see how solar plus battery storage can make life a little more convenient. MRE, the smarter choice.
Louisiana lawmakers approve a ban on abortion after 6 weeks with a so-called heartbeat bill.
The only exception in the measure is if the mother's life is in danger. There are none for rape or incest. The fetal heartbeat can be detected in the 6th week of pregnancy before many women know they're pregnant. Governor John Bel Edwards, the only Democrat in the Deep South to hold that office, intends to sign the bill into law.
Fox's Tom Rigotti. And this is the latest in a wave of legislation this year aimed at challenging Supreme Court protections for abortions. In San Diego, a hospital announces the birth of a girl believed to be the world's tiniest surviving baby. She came into the world at a mere 8.6 ounces. The little girl is home now after spending nearly 5 months in the neonatal intensive care unit to grow to a healthy 5 pounds. Well, Texas moves forward with plans to execute a killer.
Christopher Lee Price faces a lethal injection tonight. He'd been convicted for stabbing a pastor to death with a sword during Christmas week of 1991. His legal team is trying to stop the execution with a challenge to the Alabama lethal injection method. Federal appeals court Wednesday said no, ruling the U.S. Supreme Court has already decided that case. Price was scheduled to die 7 weeks ago. A stay was issued before the execution. The U.S. Supreme Court voted 5-4 to lift that stay and let the execution go forward, but that ruling was issued after the death warrant expired at midnight. Jack Callahan, Fox News.
Just days after missing hiker Amanda Eller was found alive in Hawaii, crews found another missing hiker dead. Helicopter rescuers spotted the body of Noah Kakai Mina yesterday, about 300 feet below a fall line on a mountain on Maui. He had been missing for 9 days. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Join Ray Gibson as he celebrates 40 years on the air.
40 years already? Hi, I'm doing the big broadcast from BMW's brand new showroom at Atkins Kroll, and I want you to join in on the fun. Come on by and see us do the show live and in person, and since it's a party, we've got all kinds of super goodies to give away. United Airlines is letting me give away 2 tickets to Japan. And your next trip to the Philippines, we've got your hotel accommodations covered with goodies from Resort World Manila. It's been a great ride, and this is a great excuse to get caught up with some of our favorite guests and friends of the show.
Ray Gibson's 40th anniversary show is brought to you by AK BMW and Shooting Star Productions, with special thanks to United Airlines and Resorts World Manila.
Tune in Friday, June 7th, or check out the Points Facebook live feed, provided and produced by Shooting Star Productions.
Okay, well, here we are with the second half of Tall Tales. Everybody had a chance to enjoy that big halftime show that we always bring on at 1700 in the middle of every episode of Tall Tales. We've got the second half. We're in the beginning of the second half. And before I plunge into Tall Tales versus the Mayor's Council, let me just check and see what our Facebook friends are saying. I noticed Ishmael Velez was here first. He's almost always the first guy here. Good for Ishmael. And then, let's see, I've got Jesse Lemtiaco was second, and it looks like Jesse is running for senator because he has posted a picture of himself standing beside the road waving as though he were running for senator. Or maybe he's going to run for the CCU after this kerfuffle involving the executive session. And let's see, I've got Mark Cruz is here, and Mark Cruz comments on Pocahontas, F-A-U-X, Pocahontas. Good call, Mark. Donna Mila Inta-Titano is here with us this afternoon, and she says she was shocked at hearing the CCU secret meeting recording. Sad. She said it was sad. And then we've got Brad Hewitt, not surprised at all. Career politicians that believe they are invincible. And Shelley Gibson is always pleasant, just says, hi, Mr. Klitzkie. You know, when I hear somebody say Mr. Klitzkie, I always look around to see if my Uncle Roy is in the room somewhere. You know, I just can't imagine anyone referring to me as Mr., but I guess it happens. And then Nate horns in and says, I'm late, still here though. Mark Cruz, how many non-U.S. citizens were registered to vote in California thanks to their motor voter law? Yeah, well, California thrives on the non-U.S. citizens voting. Open borders, gang, because, you know, the more people that are counted in your state during the census, the more federal money you get back on a per capita basis. and the more representation you get in Congress. So citizen schmidison, the folks, the politicians in California say, we don't need no stinking citizens. And then we've got Brad Hewitt, pretty simple to scan a form and send it to the election board. Yeah, you'd think so, Brad. Nate horns in and says, use the telegraph like the 1800s. Hey, Brad, we're still using the telegraph in 1900s. As a matter of fact, in 1963, when the government of Guam offered me a job, they did it with a telegram, of all things. Real Joe Cruz, you've probably never even seen a telegram, have you?
Yeah, one of those 30s movies.
In one of the 30s movies.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Better than nothing, Real Joe Cruz. Albert Eliasson, rock salt and bacon rinds. I don't know how you would communicate with rock salt and bacon rinds, but then Brad comes back and says, why not use the kite string system? And that was my idea, kite string, a couple of tin cans. The technology is tough. Probably it takes the average 7-year-old or 8-year-old to figure out how to do it right. But Brad says, why not use the kite string system? People stand in line just so they can get a precious ink stamp that says paid. That's true, here in the 2019. And we're still presenting forms and copies and getting stamped copies back. And then Brad says, as far as the kite string system, it's too advanced. Mark Cruz comes along and says, has a link to countries with mandatory voting. I know Aussie has mandatory voting. If you don't vote, you get fined. And I got a cousin that emigrated to Australia, and he told me that people that live there go to kind of elaborate schemes to avoid the fine and voting. The power of democracy. Brad Hewitt back again. How about motor firearms registration? Make life easier for a lot of folks. I guess you could do that when you're filling out those forms. Put the serial number of your weapon on the form. If we got to do that, pay the fee, etc. Makes sense to me. And Tato Guay. Carnival has not been family-friendly for years. Now, I'll go along with that. There was a time I'd take kids, grandchildren to the carnival, but no more. Jesse Limtiaco. Many people, not all on Guam, grew up seeing the family playing games of chance during family parties. I personally knew of games of chance were for the adults. You'd only be around them if they'd ask for a beer or chessa. Otherwise, you weren't allowed to be around. Well, you grew up in a sensible environment, Jesse. Unfortunately, there are parents who are less sensible than yours apparently were. And then Nate horns in again. He's got good wishes for Joey. He hopes Joey's comfortable. You remember Joey put the word comfort on the map. He said he just wasn't comfortable in allowing the recording of that executive session. He just wasn't comfortable doing that. I can understand. And I'll bet he's a whole lot less comfortable now that it happened. And then we've got Nate horning in again in Kevin's defense, and he's talking about my, a feeble attempt at humor when I said that Kevin posted the minutes, as you were the recording on the front page of the Post, after all this talk about it being confidential, et cetera, et cetera. So Nate said, in Kevin's defense, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. This is the way I usually relate that balancing act, Nate. I would say it's better to pray for forgiveness than to beg for permission. It's better to pray for forgiveness than to beg for permission. And if it would be okay, I'm going to use a little anecdote here that demonstrates that how you ask for the question, and in what order you do it, has an awful lot to do with the answer you're going to get. And I'm going to use the priest penitent dialogue to do that. Situation 1. The penitent says to the priest, "Father, I'm a heavy smoker. I smoke all the time. But I pray. I love to pray, and I know I should pray. So would it be okay if I smoke while I'm praying?" And the priest said, "Heaven forbid, my son. Of course not. Sacrilegious. No, don't even think of such things. When you're praying, you should not be smoking." "Oh, thank you, Father." A few days later, penitent comes back and says, "Father, I spend a lot of time praying. I'm a real devout Christian, and I pray a lot. And sometimes when I'm praying, I really kind of feel a little bit odd because I haven't had any nicotine. So would it be okay if I smoke while I'm praying?" "No." "Would it be okay if I pray while I'm smoking, Father?" "Bless you, my son. Even when you're smoking, you're still thinking about your responsibility to pray." Yeah, so it's better to pray for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Going on to Jesse Limtiaco. Maybe the CCU feels ratepayers aren't paying enough. Yeah, that would be an interesting... if that's the way they feel, I can see why they don't want to meet into open session. Also, apparently the raises represented a tiny percentage of the budget. And that's true. You know, when you figure out the size of how much money the CCU collects from the ratepayers and the size of the raises, it'd be a very, very small fraction, no doubt. But a couple of things are involved here. One should be extremely careful when he's spending his own money. That's the way I think things should be. But as careful as you are when you're spending your own money, you should be 10 times more careful when you're spending somebody else's. And that didn't happen. And when you're spending somebody else's money, you shouldn't let them, they should never be in a position to guess why you're doing it. So the CCU has got a couple of things here to pray for forgiveness about, and it's really sad. I feel kind of sad myself because as longtime Tall Tales buffs know, I've been a booster of the CCU, talking about how much better things are now than they were pre-CCU, how happy I am that we elect members to on and on and on. And then to have this happen, wow, it's just like I found out the time that I found out that it really wasn't Santa Claus, it's just my neighbor wearing a costume. I was brokenhearted. Okay, so much for Facebook. Let's talk about the Mayor's Council here. The Mayor's Council, there's a story in today's Post, a Kevin Kerrigan story, 2 cleared for carnival gambling. No details shared. Okay, can you see a red flag going up? No details shared. Victoria B. Espinosa has been cleared by the Department of Rev Tax to operate 4 of the 5 games of chance at this year's Liberation Carnival, including the House of Cards, where casino-style card games will be run. Victoria B. Espinosa. Not exactly a household name. In addition to the House of Cards, Espinosa has also been cleared to operate 2 color games, a big and small game, and 1 of the Beto games. Despite official promises of transparency, it isn't clear what organization she represents or what, if any, other investors she represents. Does the word stalking horse come into the rap here? Is Victoria Espinosa, and it was like $250,000 for the House of Cards. Does Victoria Espinosa have that heavy a purse? Or is she a stalking horse for anonymous money sources that want to get in on the gambling? I don't know. And that's the problem when you aren't transparent, Mayor's Council. The only other named person to get clearance to operate a game of chance is Jonathan Shea, who together with the Mong Mong Toto Municipal Planning Council has been cleared to operate the second authorized big and small game. Let's talk about municipal planning councils. You know, we have 19 villages, and each village has a village mayor. He's elected for 4 years. And under our law, he has a municipal planning council. And guess how members get on the municipal planning council, Real Joe Cruz?
How do they do that, sir?
The mayor appoints them.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm going to appoint you to give me advice. I wonder what kind of advice you get from people that you appoint yourself. But the mayor's planning council is not a fictive entity. It cannot sue and be sued in its own name. It's not like a corporation. It's just some folks, not a government, even a government agency. So why would Jonathan Shea and the Mong Mong Toto Municipal Planning, Mong Mong Toto Mighty Municipal Planning Council be looking for this kind of clearance to operate a game? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then we have bidder Fred Cruz. He's waiting his clearance to run the second Beto Beto game. I'm surprised that the folks at RevTax would give this information to Kevin because, wait a minute, isn't this a personnel matter? We're talking about people and we're mentioning their names. I think that's a personnel matter. No, that's right. We're not dealing with a CCU. We're dealing with the Director of Revenue Tax. Cruz, Espinosa, and Shea have collectively bid more than $400,000 for the rights to the games of chance at this year's carnival. Who are they? What organizations do they represent? Who, if any, are the other investors that joined with them to put up the money to win the rights to these games? That information hasn't been shared. You see why I call this Tall Tales versus the Mayor's Council? I'm going to have to download that nasty letter software in my computer again and start cranking out FOIAs. If the Mayor's Council and the Director of RevTax and Angel Sablan, the $100,000 man, don't answer these questions pretty quickly. And we go on in the article here. The Mayor's Council of Guam released the carnival vendor list late Wednesday afternoon after the Department of Revenue and Taxation had closed. And it was not possible to learn if there are other names or organizations on the clearances that were granted. So there's an old saying in politics, timing is everything. So, you know, if you've got stuff you don't want anybody to see, do it at 4:59 in the afternoon. Do it at 4:59 on a Friday if you can. And that stays hidden for a long time. Contacted by phone, Council Executive Director Angel Sablan was not able to say who the other investors are. Well, at least he didn't say it was a personnel matter. I'll give him that. The House of Cards is where casino-style gambling games will be held. Those games include poker, blackjack, baccarat, monte, and pasoi. The card games will be played in the old casino building at the Paseo, which was never used after it was built. Its construction in 2017 triggered the ban on all games of chance at the carnival, which, thanks to James Moylan, has been lifted this year. The Mayor's Council has said that the Liberation Carnival has suffered since the ban without funds that were raised by the bidding out of games of chance. We can hardly afford to take junkets to the Philippines anymore, Sablon said. That's not what the article, I just ad-libbed that again, Real Joe Cruz. So KUAM has a little different take on it. This is what KUAM says. Picking up in the middle of the article, one person in particular, Victoria Espinosa, was named as the winner for not only the $240,000 House of Cards bid. And here's Angel Sablon. I'm sure she's part of a group that's come together to put their money together to operate the House of Cards, big and small, color game, Beto Beto, because this year there's no requirement like before that you have to be a nonprofit organization. Mayor's Council Executive Director Angel Sablon said, "We had it in our proposals, but when the final version came out, it wasn't there. So it gave individuals themselves an opportunity to get together and bid for this." Sablon says he's not sure who the other investors are. Once they give us the clearance that they've been cleared, who are we to question whether or not they can be part of our liberation festivities or not? He said. Who are we to question? Well, Angel, if you're speaking as the executive director of the Mayor's Council, you are the Mayor's Council. You have to take responsibility for this, and if it all turns to ashes, guess who's going to get the blame? You. Who are we to question whether or not they can be a part of our liberation festivities? So you try to be the Pope, Angel? Who am I to judge? Angel Sablon said as he adjusted his mitre and looked for a good camera angle. So this goes right back to what I've been saying from the very beginning. The Mayor's Council should be done away with. We need a Mayor's Council like we need another hole in the head. We've got enough boards and commissions to screw things up as it is. Mayors are the only local officials in our government. The boundaries of a mayor's activities ought to be the boundaries of the village wherein he was elected, and he should spend 110% of his time on that, not fooling around in a quasi-parliamentary body that has already screwed this gambling thing up pretty bad because it was in our proposals, but when the final version came out, it wasn't there. I don't know how that happened. It just wasn't there, and now we can't. We who are we to judge? So that Mayor's Council should be done away with. For me, this is what I want to see. I want my mayor to concentrate on nothing but my village. I don't want him sitting in a Mayor's Council, making motions, acting like the lower house of our parliament here, engaging in Liberation Day carnivals, contests, just concentrate on the village. And here we go. This is exactly what I predicted of all of the commissions and boards on island that you could entrust to do rules and regulations. The Mayor's Council is right at the very, very bottom. And that's exactly what happened. Remember, it took them 3 cracks at the ball before they got one before the legislature that met the requirements of statute. So if I were suspicious, would I say, yeah, what we've done is we have created a money-making machine, gambling, casino gambling, for the right person who we won't even find out the name of because he's operating through a stalking horse. Would I say that? I don't know. That's just pure speculation on my part. And it's the product of not being it's the product of giving things to boards and commissions that can't handle them. Are you listening, Chamorro Land Trust Commission? And it's the product of a lack of transparency. I'll be back right after the 7th inning stretch.
2-for-1 dinner time is back at Ruby Tuesday Guam. That's 2 fresh garden bars, 2 tasty entrees, and a sweet dessert to share for just $25.99. 2-for-1 dinner time for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
So here we are, back after the 7th inning stretch. I wonder if when the carnival opens at the House of Cards, if they'll be betting on the games in the 7th inning stretch. I don't think Angel Sablan could tell us whether that would be part of the games or not. One of our posters here said. Angel should have said it's under audit, like Donald Trump and his income tax, which is kind of the national equivalent of it's a personnel matter. We can't talk about it. So there we are with the Mayor's Council and Angel Sablan, and once again doing a really bad job already. Can only imagine where this is all going to go. And Talina Nelson, you had the right idea when you said give the parade to the Guam Visitors Bureau. Don't give anything to the Mayor's Council. Don't give anything to the mayors. Just let them be the mayors. But, of course, you know, the mayors are a politically volatile or dangerous substance. It's kind of like handling nitroglycerin. You want to be very careful that you don't shake it too much, because it could blow up on you. And politicians are convinced that senatorial candidates and other politicians are convinced that every mayor has the people in his village in, I was going to say his pocket, but that would be wrong, has the people in their village in their pocket. There's only one commissioner, but it's still there. And if you anger the mayors, they will turn the people in their village against you, and you will not be reelected. Therefore, tread very softly around the mayors. It's a really good example of what I'm talking about is that mayors now draw higher salaries than senators. I think it's up at $75,000, and senators are back at $55,000. And what happened was that when the Juan Pat Tin and Ray Tenorio did their salary smash and grab, the mayors were picked up in the updraft, and they were given these higher salaries. And after the public found out about it, a very angry public asked some of the senators that lost their seats because of it. And so several senators lost their seats. And in the 34th Guam legislature, the senatorial salaries were rolled back. It took 4 or 5 attempts to roll the senators' salaries back. And the salary of the mayors was a poison pill in a couple of those attempts. So a senator would introduce a bill to roll all of the salaries back, including the mayors. And the senators would be afraid to vote for it. They knew that politically they'd be better off rolling their own salaries back, but they didn't want to take on the mayors. So that turned out to be a poison pill. So when it was all over, senatorial salaries were rolled back, but mayor salaries stay where they are. And you can't blame this on the CCU, but they're overpaid. Especially they're overpaid if they're not doing their jobs in the villages. You know, we hear about them, well, we're not going to cut the grass on the school grounds. We're mayors. And dogs in our village, that's the Department of Agriculture. And trash in the village, we're too busy for that. Remember that? That would not be a good use of our time to try to catch the people that are littering in our villages. So I'm just not surprised that this gambling thing is off to a really bad start. I don't see how it could have gotten off to anything but a really bad start. And once again, I lay the blame on new Senator Jim Moylan. You'll recall Jim Moylan introduced a bill that would allow the Mayor's Council to do rules and regulations at a time when that kind of gambling was illegal. But he allowed for the preparation of rules and regulations so that if gambling were illegal, that's what would be done. And his bill changed from the time it was introduced till the time it passed to a bill that legalized gambling at the carnival. It created this monster, this rules and regulations thing at the mayor's council, etc. And now we are where we are. Just not a good idea at all. Okay, next on the calendar is Jim Moylan versus the Attorney General. And this is an article that appeared in the Daily News. It's called Tax Hike for 524 Buildings Valued at $1 million or More, AG to Defend Against Any Legal Challenge. And here's the story. Higher taxes for 2018 have been retroactively applied to 524 property improvements for buildings valued at $1 million or more, data from Rev Tax Director Daphne Shimizu shows. But Senator James Moylan said the higher tax should apply to 2019 and beyond. Attorney General Levin Camacho, meanwhile, wrote that his office would defend the government against any legal challenges to current application of the tax law. Well, of course, listeners to Tall Tales know that unless it's necessary to consume an emetic at the time he is reading a statute, an emetic is what, Real Joe Cruz?
To prevent you from throwing up, sir.
Yeah. So if you could read an act of our legislature and not need an emetic, if the Attorney General wouldn't need an emetic during the time he's reading it, then it's his duty to defend that statute. This is not a surprise. This should not come as a shock to anyone. It's just the nature of governments here, there, and everywhere, unless Barack Obama is president. And Barack Obama gave directions that the Defense of Marriage Act should not be defended in the courts of the United States. You could figure out why, probably, if you thought about that for a few minutes. Public Law 35-1, the first law signed by Governor Leon Guerrero, clarifies that the additional tax levy included in the 2018 Budget Act applies to real property improvements or buildings valued at $1 million or more, and not just those valued at exactly $1 million. The tax does not apply to the land itself. It only applies to improvements. Now, you remember when this all happened. There was a statute adopted that said there'll be about a double tax rate applied to improvements, real property improvements, for which the value was $1 million. And the Attorney General opined that that phrase had to be taken literally, that the only place the tax could apply was in the case of a building that had been assessed at $1 million. Now, several legal scholars, such as B.J. Cruz and myself, said, balderdash. It violates the rule of ridiculous consequences. It violates the rule of dealing with Scrivener's error, a couple of other things, but the Attorney General's opinion stuck. That was the old Attorney General's opinion. Or was it the new one? I don't remember. Anyhow, so a bill was introduced in the legislature that was commonly referred to as the or more bill. And the purpose of the bill was to add the words or more to the statute so that it applied that higher tax rate to real property improvements valued at $1 million or more. That was the first law passed by the new legislature. Now, Governor Leon Guerrero said, we don't need to raise taxes. We just got to collect the taxes that are in place. That was her campaign pledge. But when this came along, guess what? She signed it. And she raised the taxes on 524 buildings. And as Ray's father used to say, people don't pay taxes. As your businesses don't pay taxes, customers do. So tenants in those buildings will get stuck with it. Those who own those buildings for retail purposes will raise their prices to cover the tax. And Lou's response was, well, you know, this isn't really raising, this is correcting an error. Just correcting an error that was made before, so I'm just fixing that. But I applied the duck test to it. If it walks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, looks like a duck, guess what it is, Real Joe Cruz?
A duck, sir?
Yeah, and this was a tax increase, regardless of how you attempt to package it, what excuse you make for yourself. So it was indeed a tax increase. And then there was some controversy. Well, the tax is passed now. Does it apply now or does it apply later? And the opinion coming out was it can apply now, and it goes on statutory construction. I've done this on the program before. I'm not prepared to do it now. It's kind of boring, but I'm just going to refer back to my earlier analysis that the way the tax structure works, it's okay. It's a matter of when papers are sent out, not impinging on the effectiveness of the tax. So going back to the article, the higher tax is part of the budget law for 2019, which started on October 1, 2018. The governor said it was unfortunate that a Scrivener's error, which was the inadvertent admission of two words or more, unintentionally narrowed the scope of the levy. And then we've got Jim Moylan. Moylan on Tuesday said applying a higher tax retroactively in the absence of an authorization to do so sets a dangerous precedent. And if you had language in the bill that said you could apply it retroactively for 5 years, it'd be okay then? And then he goes on to say, we stand firm in our belief. Now, when he says we, when Jim Moylan says we, who are they talking about, Real Joe Cruz?
Us?
Yeah. Senator Jim Moylan says, we stand firm in our belief. Public Law 35-1 should be effective for 2019 property tax increase. When Moylan says we, who is he referring to?
I have no idea, sir.
They.
They, them, them.
Yeah. Pronouns used to be so easy, you know? All right, he stands firm that it should be effective for 2019 property tax increase because the enacted law failed to provide an effective date. Well, statutes are effective on the date they're enacted. And an authorization or intent that the government had no authority in back billing island residents. This sets a dangerous precedent, Moylan said. Well, I wonder if Senator Jim Moylan was on the floor at the time that this bill was discussed. And if so, did he make an amendment to the bill that said this bill shall, the tax put in place by this bill shall be effective in next year? And did he do that and he couldn't get enough votes for it to pass? Or did he just not do it? He says it sets a dangerous precedent. He asked the Attorney General to clarify Rev Tax's authority to retroactively bill a higher tax on property improvements. Well, I'm not so sure that the tax is retroactive. The real property tax is a little different from other kinds of taxes because, in a sense, the real property itself owes the taxes. And unpaid taxes are a lien against the real property. They're not a personal obligation of the owner of the real property. They're, in a sense, a personal obligation of the real property itself. So my sense is, like it or not, you could probably tax real property at just about any time. And when you send the bills out is another question altogether. So then Moylan asked the Attorney General to clarify Rev Tax's authority to retroactively bill a higher tax on property improvements. The Attorney General, in a May 21 response, told the Senator that the Office of the Attorney General would defend the government against any legal challenges to the government's current application of this law. Big surprise, right? Big, big surprise. That's the no emetic test, right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, now, apparently, Jim Moylan wasn't listening at the time when I explained the no emetic test for the to determine the Attorney General's duty. Not a good idea. So the Attorney General is going to defend that law. And then he says, the Attorney General says, because of the potential for litigation relating to your request, we used to be just one person, just like they used to be one person, right? But now I guess it's more, it could be more than, it's one person, but you still call him we, just like, the man sitting out there at the desk, they, yeah. He goes on to say, we must decline to issue an opinion at this time. Well, how could he write an opinion if he's going to have the duty of defending? Should he write an opinion and say, yeah, you're right, Jim, this retroactive application of this tax is really wrong, and it's a denial of due process, and in the really important case of Smucker-Huckowitz versus Pluto, this is what the court held. No, he's not going to do that because he's got to defend the statute. Causing me to ask another question. Aren't there any lawyers at the legislature? Historically, we've always had, and it used to be a creature of statute, we've always had someone known as legislative counsel. And it was legislative counsel's duty to advise all of the senators, majority, minority, whatever. It was his duty to advise them all on questions of law and even draft bills for them. That was legislative counsel's job. Okay, we got 10 more minutes here. I'm going to spend, I'll probably spend most of that time here with Jim Moylan. I don't really have time to go into Marsh versus Magellan. Maybe I can pick that up tomorrow.
Legends aren't born, they are made. And during our Jeep Celebration event at Cars Plus and Mighty, you'll receive up to $6,000 in accessories for the purchase of a new Jeep Wrangler Motor Trend SUV of the Year. Customize your new Jeep to the way you want it. Or how about a new Jeep Grand Cherokee? Save up to $5,000. Or save up to $7,500 on a new Jeep Compass Sport. It's our Jeep Celebration event going on now at Cars Plus and Mighty. Cars Plus, driven by you. Accessory special cannot be combined with other offers. See dealer for details.
Business travel just got easier. Take your data plan with you for only $10 a day to all 17 Data to Go destinations. Never worry about additional data roaming charges when you go where your business needs you. The US, China, Thailand, and so much more. Have the assurance you need to check emails, surf the web, and stay connected. Call 688-2677 today to make sure your account is Data to Go ready. Docomo Pacific. Better together.
So here we go, heading down the home stretch at Churchill Downs, where we count winning ahead of good manners. So back to Jim Moylan again, talking about back in the day, there was a person called a legislative counsel, and it was his job, it was their job to advise senators as to the law, draft bills, etc. And it shouldn't be necessary to run to the Attorney General every time you have a legal question. That would ordinarily be something you'd rely on legislative counsel for. And in a lot of legislatures, there have been minority counsels. I remember one time B.J. Cruz was minority counsel. And as far as legislative counsel, in the 14th and 15th, I was legislative counsel. And in the 20th, I had a short gig as minority counsel. So I have some idea what I'm talking about here for a change, right? So rather than ask dumb questions, Jim, and the question you ask is frankly a dumb question, you should be talking to legislative counsel. And even if you are going to ask a question of the Attorney General, the way you ask the question has an awful lot to do with what kind of an answer you're going to get back. Going back to my priest penitent smoking example. So ask that question of the Attorney General, not a very good move. And then the article goes on to say, the senator said his question was never answered on whether the government can or can't arbitrarily proceed with retroactively billing island residents for tax increases without an authorization. Well, you shouldn't be shocked that your question wasn't answered. Now, here's another thing that people in the legislature ought to take into account. If you are a senator, you have a means of communicating with your constituents. And that means of communicating with your constituents is called bills. You introduce bills to let your constituents know what you stand for, what you think should be done, what you think shouldn't be done. Writing letters to the Attorney General is not a communication. It's a sign that you really aren't up to speed on the job that you ran for. So if you think that this is an injustice, then maybe you could introduce a bill, Senator Jim Moylan. And I can't get over your bill to roll back the GRT to 4% and the liquid fuel tax. You did the right thing. You were right there at the very beginning of the legislature introducing those bills, communicating a strong message to the folks that voted for you, and then you let it go because you'd made the bills effective on the 1st of October. So, the governor is Guam's tax commissioner, according to the story here, said last week that she instructed Shimizu of Rev Tax to apply the higher tax when the budget law became effective in 2018. Once again, another myth. The governor of Guam is not the tax commissioner. Repeating, the governor of Guam is not the tax commissioner. Put that one right over there with, we can't talk about it, it's a personnel matter. And I've been through this on Tall Tales. If you look at the Organic Act, you'll find that the income tax laws in force in the United States are likewise enforced in Guam. But on Guam, we don't call it the United States income tax, we call it the Guam territorial income tax. And it's the mirror image of the U.S. income tax. But when it comes to the Guam territorial income tax, the governor of Guam has the same position with respect to that tax as the Secretary of Treasury of the United States has to the income tax. You won't find the word tax commissioner anywhere in there. And what I described applies only to the income tax, which is imposed by the Organic Act. It doesn't apply to gross receipts tax, real property tax, any other tax. The governor is not the tax commissioner. The governor is, however, the governor. And she appoints the Director of Revenue and Taxation. And as Simon Sanchez would say, the Director of Revenue and Taxation serves at her pleasure. So the governor tells the Director of Rev Tax to do something. We would expect the director to do it. If the director has strong feelings about not doing it, the governor could very well fire her. Occasionally, you'll find someone who is stricken by conscience and saying, I can't do that, I resign. But the governor's not the tax commissioner. So the governor said last week that she instructed Shimizu to apply the higher tax when the budget law became effective. The governor said, we want to capture those taxes. This is the same governor who said, we don't need new taxes. Because the intent was to tax the million and above, and it was a technical error that they didn't clarify it. So we went back and clarified it, but the law still is effective and should be taxed from the effective date of the first bill that was passed. Well, I agree with the result, but I don't agree with the reasoning there, Governor. But I suppose that's close enough. That's all I got time for on this. But, of course, we'll be back tomorrow with unfortunately, the last episode of Tall Tales this week. The real Joe and I are going to go back into withdrawal for a couple of days. So we'll see you tomorrow.